In the dim, dust-filled rooms of 19th-century laboratories, those half-forgotten sanctuaries of glass flasks and brass instruments, there existed a quiet suspicion that the world of plants was not as inert as science had so confidently declared. The botanists of the age, men in heavy wool coats, leaning over microscopes by candlelight, were convinced they had mapped the boundaries of vegetative life. Plants moved slowly, drank silently, and obeyed an order of existence closer to stone than to animal. Yet beneath the seemingly passive leaves of the greenhouse, where moisture clung to panes and shadows trembled with every passing cloud, a deeper story waited that would whisper to generations of thinkers who dared imagine that life did not divide itself so neatly. Long before the era of microscopes and meticulous classification, ancient civilizations had already personified the green realm. In Egypt, priests carrying sprigs of sacred persea believed the tree listened to the hymns dedicated to Ra. In early Vedic India, towering Sala forests were thought to murmur admonitions to wandering ascetics. And among the pre-Socratic Greeks, the notion that plants possessed a form of psyche hovered at the edges of philosophical debate. But these early intuitions were enveloped by myth and ritual, and later eras dismissed them as poetic exaggeration rather than observations rooted in nature. Still, legends persisted, the rustling of leaves as messengers of gods, groves that punished trespassers, vines that curled not only toward sunlight, but toward human presence itself. By the 17th century, as Europe emerged from the fog of medieval superstition, the botanical world was subjected to new laws of empiricism. The mechanical philosophy, championed by thinkers like Descartes, declared the universe a machine and plants mere passive gears within it. To ascribe sensitivity or intention to vegetation was to stray into anthropomorphism, a sin against the new rational order. Yet even then, anomalies surfaced, defying all orderly classifications. Travelers returning from India, their journals reeking of monsoon humidity, described the astonishing Mimosa pudica, whose leaflets snapped closed at the slightest touch. In the greenhouses of Paris, onlookers gasped as the shy plant collapsed like a creature startled by sudden light. For a moment, the crisp lines between plant and animal blurred, but the phenomenon was filed away, attributed to simple mechanical reflex, and science moved on. But not every mind was satisfied with the mechanical explanation. By the mid-19th century, as empires expanded and global expeditions carried naturalists into uncharted forests, new botanical puzzles emerged. In the dripping jungles of Borneo, Alfred Russel Wallace watched parasitic vines twist their tendrils with remarkable precision, anchoring themselves to host trees with movements that seemed strategic. In South America, explorers observed monstrous passion flowers timing their blooming so precisely that certain species of moth appeared moments later, as if flower and insect kept an invisible, shared schedule. These observations hinted at complexity, but the scientific establishment remained anchored to the belief that plants were incapable of sensation or choice. Any appearance of intention was dismissed as coincidence sculpted by evolutionary pressures. Into this world stepped a quiet, bespectacled man whose curiosity did not respect disciplinary boundaries. Charles Darwin, already famous for On the Origin of Species. Few remember today that during his later years, Darwin became increasingly fascinated, almost obsessed with plants. The same man who had once studied finches on the Galapagos now spent long hours watching tendrils creep across blackened paper, tracing their movements with painstaking patience. In the warm confines of his study at Down House, illuminated by soft afternoon light, he observed how climbing plants executed circular, searching motions, a slow yet persistent probing of their environment. In these movements, he detected patterns, intentional arcs, directional shifts that resembled an animal sensing its surroundings. Darwin's experiments grew more ambitious. With his son, Francis, they investigated the mysterious behavior of roots. They constructed ingenious setups, glass plates coated with soot, wooden boards etched with grids, and narrow tunnels filled with chalky soil. Observing the paths of root tips, he noted how they avoided obstacles, altered direction, and even paused, as though gathering information. He postulated that the root apex functioned like the brain of a lower animal, coordinating responses to multiple stimuli. The idea, radical for its time, challenged the prevailing belief that plants lacked centralized control. His colleagues reacted with discomfort. The scientific community was not prepared to entertain the possibility of vegetable intelligence. But Darwin, unburdened by the need for approval, pressed onward, convinced that plants were far more sophisticated than anyone had dared assume. While Darwin quietly dissected the secret motions of greenery, across the British Empire, a man was conducting experiments that would shake the foundations of botanical science. In colonial Calcutta, Jagadish Chandra Bose, a physicist by training, stood before instruments he had built with his own hands, delicate galvanometers, resonant frequency detectors, and exquisitely sensitive apparatuses capable of measuring the faintest electrical impulses. Bose had already astonished the Royal Society with his discoveries in radio waves, but his attention began to drift toward something that seemed, at first glance, beneath the notice of modern physics: plants.
Bose believed that living organisms, regardless of their place in the taxonomic hierarchy, shared fundamental physiological processes, including the transmission of electrical signals. His laboratory, humming with the low buzz of experimental machinery, became a crucible in which ancient intuitions about plant sensitivity collided with precise, quantifiable measurement. When he attached electrodes to the stalk of an ordinary plant, the needle of his instrument trembled with unmistakable pulses. The plant responded to heat, light, poison, and mechanical pressure, not metaphorically, but electrically, in rhythmic waves akin to the nerve impulses of animals. In one experiment, he applied chloroform to a plant, watching as its responses slowed and ceased. Once the vapor dissipated, the pulses revived. The implication was staggering. Anesthesia affected plants just as it did animals. His contemporaries reacted with disbelief bordering on alarm. Victorian science was not prepared to accept that the same forces governing animal nervous systems could be present in the silent stems of vegetation. Accusations of error, miscalibration, and wishful thinking swirled around him. But Bose, unflinching, continued refining his devices. His crescograph, capable of magnifying plant movements 10,000 times, revealed growth fluctuations that followed cycles, rhythms, and responses to external stimuli. These were not mechanical expansions of inert tissue, but dynamic reactions to the environment, swift enough to register within seconds. It was as if the hidden life of plants had finally found a voice, one that vibrated across the needles of his machines. Even as Bose pushed boundaries in India, Europe clung to an older paradigm. Laboratories in Berlin, Paris, and London still echoed with declarations that plants were mute automatons, incapable of sensation or intentional behavior. Yet outside the echo chambers of academia, the cultural imagination had begun to shift. The Industrial Revolution had transformed landscapes, replacing forests with iron railways and brick foundries. And in response, writers and artists felt a growing nostalgia for the natural world. Poets wrote of forests breathing, vines yearning for sunlight, and fields whispering in twilight winds. Though metaphorical, these expressions hinted at a collective intuition that life extended beyond human-defined consciousness. By the early 20th century, as technological inventions reshaped how people perceived the world, a new fascination emerged: the possibility that plants might communicate. Telegraph wires spanned continents, radio waves pulsed invisibly through the air, and scientists were forced to acknowledge that unseen forms of transmission could bind distant points together. If metals could carry messages, and the ether itself could vibrate with coded signals, why not the Green Kingdom? Researchers began investigating chemical secretions from roots, airborne pheromones emitted by leaves, and symbiotic networks between trees and fungi. What had once been myth began acquiring empirical texture. Forests, it turned out, were less collections of individuals and more sprawling, interconnected societies.
Still, for all these discoveries, mainstream science maintained strict discipline. To suggest that plants experienced anything akin to emotion or awareness remained taboo. Yet, in a California laboratory in the 1960s, a decade restless with experimentation and suspicion of old authorities. An unexpected figure would ignite a controversy that reached far beyond academic journals. It began, as many scientific upheavals do, with an accident so mundane that no one could have predicted the storm it would unleash. In the fluorescent-lit offices of a polygraph manufacturer in San Diego, California, Cleve Baxter, a former interrogation specialist for U.S. intelligence agencies, sat alone one quiet night in 1966, surrounded by coils of wire and the faint hum of electrical equipment. Baxter, who had spent years studying the subtle physiological cues of human stress and deception, was driven by curiosity rather than any botanical ambition when he decided, almost whimsically, to attach the electrodes of a polygraph to the broad green leaf of a Dracaena plant that decorated the corner of his office. He watered the soil, expecting the polygraph to register increased electrical conductance as moisture traveled upward through the plant's tissues. Instead, the needle traced a pattern eerily reminiscent of a human emotional response. Baxter stared at the inked line, mesmerized. The signal did not fluctuate randomly. It rose and dipped with a rhythm that defied any conventional botanical explanation. Drawn deeper into the mystery, he contemplated ways to provoke a stronger reaction. A thought, unspoken yet vivid, crossed his mind. Perhaps he could burn the leaf. The moment the mental image crystallized, the polygraph needle soared upward in a sharp, unmistakable arc, as though the plant had perceived the unvoiced threat. Baxter froze, his breath suspended in the charged silence of the room. Had the plant reacted to his intention? It was an idea so outrageous that even he struggled to accept it. Yet the chart recorder before him bore testimony to an event he could neither dismiss nor explain. Word of Baxter's experiment spread quietly at first, carried through conversations among psychologists, parapsychologists, and curious academics. Some dismissed it outright. Plants, according to into this tumult, stepped two writers, Peter Tompkins and Christopher Bird, whose journalistic instincts drove them to investigate the emerging tapestry of unconventional botanical research. Tompkins, a former war correspondent accustomed to geopolitical intrigue, and Bird, a former CIA operative fluent in obscure scientific literature, traveled across continents, interviewing botanists, engineers, mystics, and renegade experimenters. They sifted through dusty archives of forgotten plant physiologists, examined the meticulous notebooks of early biophysicists, and immersed themselves in Bose's neglected writings, discovering a trove of experiments that had been ignored or dismissed for decades. Observing a pattern of unexplored anomalies, they began piecing together a narrative of plant behavior that transcended the limits of conventional biology. Their collaboration culminated in a sweeping work that would challenge the public's understanding of life itself, The Secret Life of Plants. The book, a kaleidoscope of scientific observations, historical anecdotes, and bold philosophical speculation, argued that plants were not passive background actors in the drama of evolution, but active participants, perceptive, responsive, and astonishingly complex. It revived the work of pioneers like Bose and Darwin, contextualizing their findings within a broader framework of plant communication, electrophysiological sensitivity, and environmental awareness. Though its conclusions outraged many scientists, the book struck a chord with millions of readers, becoming a cultural phenomenon that expanded the dialogue about plant consciousness. But beneath the swirl of popular attention, an even deeper transformation was unfolding in laboratories across the world. As researchers gained access to more sophisticated tools, fluorescent dyes, electrophysiological sensors, radioactive tracers, they began uncovering secrets that even the most imaginative early theorists could not have predicted. In the subterranean root systems of forests, they detected vast networks of fungi intertwined with tree roots, forming the now famous mycorrhizal web, a communication system so intricate that
In greenhouses insulated from the outside world, experiments revealed further mysteries. When cucumber tendrils groped through space, they did not move blindly. High-speed cameras revealed micro-adjustments in curvature, as though tendrils were sampling their surroundings before committing to a direction. Carnivorous plants, such as the Venus flytrap, demonstrated rapid-fire electrical signaling so sensitive that a difference of milliseconds determined whether the trap closed or remained open. Even more perplexing were the sunflowers, whose circadian rhythms remained perfectly aligned with solar movement, even after days in artificial light, suggesting internal clocks of astonishing reliability. Meanwhile, in remote tropical forests, field biologists studying strangler figs encountered behavior that seemed to border on the strategic. These plants, beginning life high in the canopy, extended roots downward in thin, twisting ropes, encasing host trees with such precision that the pattern resembled deliberate architectural design. As the host weakened, the fig adjusted its growth, tightening its lattice structure to maintain stability. The process occurred over decades, yet the cumulative result appeared coordinated, as though the plant possessed a long-term developmental plan responsive to environmental cues. All of this compelled a reconsideration of the rigid lines that had once separated the vegetal from the animal. Yet resistance remained fierce. The scientific establishment was wary of granting plants any attributes associated with sentience, fearing a slippery slope towards pseudoscience. Experiments that hinted at plant memory, choice, or awareness faced rigorous scrutiny, often dismissed for lacking mechanistic explanations. Still, as instrumentation grew more refined, the list of anomalies continued to expand. Laser microscopy revealed intracellular calcium waves that pulsed through plant tissues in response to stimuli, functioning as a signaling system comparable in complexity to animal calcium pathways. Genetic studies uncovered plant receptors sensitive to minute vibrations, enabling them to detect the chewing frequencies of insects and adjust their defenses accordingly. What humans perceived as silence was in fact filled with vibrations that plants detected with remarkable acuity. In the early 2000s, a new generation of botanists and plant neurobiologists, often working on the fringes of academia, revived and reframed earlier theories. They acknowledged that plants lacked neurons and brains, but argued that intelligence did not require centralized organs. It could emerge from distributed networks, as seen in slime molds or certain species of jellyfish. The term plant neurobiology, though controversial, marked a turning point. Conferences convened, papers debated, and hypotheses refined, all aimed at understanding how plants processed information. They investigated how roots navigated soil gradients, distinguishing between nutritious zones and barren patches. How climbing
These findings prompted more daring inquiries. Could plants learn? Could they remember? In controlled settings, researchers exposed plants to repeated harmless stimuli, observing that some species reduced their responses over time, a behavior known in animals as habituation, a rudimentary form of learning. Even more intriguing were experiments suggesting associative learning. Plants that paired environmental cues with specific treatments seemed to adjust their behavior when the cues reappeared. Though debated fiercely, such studies reopened questions that had been shelved for decades, drawing attention back to the foundational mysteries that figures like Darwin and Bose had intuited long before modern biology possessed the tools to examine them. As these scientific battles unfolded, the cultural landscape evolved in parallel. The environmental crises of the late 20th and 21st centuries, melting glaciers, collapsing ecosystems, mass extinctions, forced humanity to acknowledge the fragility and sophistication of plant life. Entire forests vanished before scientists could decode their intricate networks. Species with unknown chemical vocabularies disappeared without ever being studied. Amid this urgency, the idea that plants possessed a hidden interiority, a realm of responses far more nuanced than once believed, gained renewed significance. The renewed significance of plant interiority inspired researchers to journey into environments where vegetation had evolved under pressures dramatically different from those familiar biomes. In the desolate plateaus of Patagonia, ecologists crouched beside wind-scoured shrubs whose survival strategies bordered on the uncanny. These plants, subjected to relentless gusts capable of stripping moisture from leaves within minutes, had developed subtle forms of aerodynamic growth. Their branches curved, twisted, and even aligned themselves with prevailing wind patterns, suggesting a form of environmental sampling that occurred not through movement, but through minute adjustments over seasons. When storms approached, their internal water pressure shifted hours in advance, hinting that they responded to atmospheric cues imperceptible to human senses. This behavior did not resemble instinct in the animal sense, but it displayed a sophistication that defied earlier dismissals of plant responsiveness as mere mechanics. In the storm-battered coastal marshes of the southern United States, field biologists noticed another form of sensitivity: marsh grasses that altered the salinity of their root zones by selectively excreting salt, a behavior orchestrated across whole stands of vegetation. When tide surged, the grasses responded in near synchrony, as if communicating through the saturated soil in a chorus of ionic exchange. This collective adjustment protected the integrity of the marsh, reducing erosion and stabilizing the ecosystem. What struck researchers was not simply the adaptation itself, but the rapidity and coordination with which it manifested. Too swift, they argued, to be explained solely by genetic predisposition. It resembled a kind of group-level reactivity, as though the plants sensed shifts in their environment collectively, rather than as isolated individuals.
As research expanded, so too did the realization that human cultural traditions had long acknowledged plant perception in ways science had only recently begun to investigate. In Amazonian communities, shamans spoke reverently of forest plants that taught through dreams or revealed medicinal properties in visions. Although such claims lay outside the realm of empirical study, ethnobotanists discovered that the plants used in these rituals often contained compounds with profound neurological effects, interacting with human consciousness in ways that blurred the boundaries between physiological response and symbolic experience. These practices, preserved across generations, hinted at relationships with vegetation that involved communication not in the scientific sense, but in a deeply experiential one. Relationships that modern researchers could not dismiss without acknowledging their own limited vantage point. Meanwhile, in the frozen tundra of Siberia, another mystery unfolded. Beneath layers of permafrost, scientists discovered seeds of Silene stenophylla, a flowering plant that had remained dormant for over 30,000 years. When the seeds were coaxed into germination in controlled conditions, the resulting plants displayed subtle differences from their contemporary descendants, variations in petal shape, growth rate, and flowering cycle that suggested adaptations to an ancient environment. What stunned botanists was the resilience of the embryonic tissue, which retained viability through epochs of geological change, surviving cold that would destroy most cellular structures. This endurance pointed to sophisticated protective mechanisms within the seeds, biochemical networks capable of pausing time itself. The revival of the plant provided not only a living snapshot of prehistoric flora, but also evidence that plants harbored survival strategies of staggering complexity, strategies that were only now becoming accessible to scientific scrutiny.
In deserts stretching across North Africa and the Arabian Peninsula, where life seemed impossibly scarce, researchers encountered plants whose behaviors blurred the line between endurance and anticipation. The Welwitschia mirabilis, a plant that could live for 2,000 years or more, possessed only 2 leaves that grew continuously throughout its life. These leaves recorded environmental history like the rings of a tree, capturing fluctuations in temperature, humidity, and rainfall across centuries. Yet what fascinated scientists was not the longevity, but the plant's response to moisture. Even before fog rolled across the desert, its stomata adjusted, preparing to capture droplets from the air. This preemptive behavior suggested sensory mechanisms that extended beyond simple humidity detection, perhaps molecular receptors keyed to atmospheric ions or minute shifts in pressure. Whatever the mechanism, the result was an organism that lived at the threshold of survival, adjusting its physiology not only after environmental changes occurred, but in anticipation of them. At the same time, the field of acoustic ecology uncovered another dimension of plant behavior. Researchers equipped with ultrasonic microphones and vibration sensors captured faint clicks, pulses, and oscillations emitted by plants under stress. Tomato plants and tobacco plants, when deprived of water, produced ultrasonic sounds beyond human hearing, signals that increased in frequency as drought intensified. While the exact function of these emissions remained debated, the discovery suggested that plants possessed internal mechanisms capable of generating airborne vibrations, perhaps as byproducts of cavitation in their xylem, but possibly also as communicative cues to organisms capable of detecting them. Experiments revealed that certain insects adjusted their behavior upon detecting these ultrasonic emissions, avoiding plants that signaled distress. Though the interpretation remained speculative, the finding added another layer to the expanding mosaic of plant communication, challenging assumptions about the boundaries of sensory biology. In the fertile agricultural valleys of Europe, modern farming practices inadvertently illuminated more plant mysteries. When fields were drenched with synthetic fertilizers, crop yields initially surged, but subtle changes emerged over time. The microbial diversity in the soil dwindled, root networks simplified, and plant resilience declined. In fields where farmers adopted organic methods, allowing microbial life to flourish, plants developed deeper root systems, exhibited stronger immune responses, and demonstrated enhanced resistance to pests. These observations led scientists to uncover the intricate dialogues between roots and soil microbes, chemical conversations involving sugars, hormones, and complex signaling molecules that shaped plant development from the moment a seed germinated. Roots exuded compounds to attract beneficial microbes. Microbes in turn produced growth-stimulating metabolites, and the entire subterranean ecology functioned as a dynamic marketplace of exchange. In laboratory settings, pea plants demonstrated behavior almost unsettling in its sophistication. When given a choice between 2 supports, one that emitted faint vibrations resembling the sound of running water, and another that remained silent. The plants grew toward the vibrating pole, as though recognizing the signal of an unseen water source. The behavior suggested sensitivity not only to moisture, but to acoustic cues associated with it. Whether the plants understood the meaning of these vibrations was irrelevant. The response indicated a sensory complexity that exceeded earlier assumptions. Such findings rekindled interest in the controversial work of Jagadish Chandra Bose, whose claims of electrical signaling in plants had been dismissed as eccentric in his time. Modern researchers, using advanced electrophysiological tools, began detecting electrical waves that propagated through plant tissues in response to injury, light changes, or temperature fluctuations. These waves, unlike animal nerve impulses, relied on different ion channels and molecular pathways, yet their functional role appeared analogous. They transmitted information rapidly across the organism, coordinating systemic responses. When a leaf was bitten by an insect, distant leaves amplified their production of defensive compounds within minutes, a process mediated by these electrical signals. The echoes of Bose's century-old observations reverberated through modern journals, vindicating ideas once dismissed as imaginative overreach. Even more startling were the discoveries unfolding at the intersection of plant biology and quantum physics. Certain pigments involved in photosynthesis exhibited quantum coherence, allowing photons to be transferred through molecular networks with near-perfect efficiency. This phenomenon, fleeting and delicate, required conditions so precise that physicists had once believed it impossible in messy, warm, biological environments. Yet plants achieved it effortlessly, channeling sunlight with an elegance that surpassed any man-made technology. The implication was profound. Within the cells of leaves, quantum events shaped the fundamental process that sustained life on Earth. High in the cloud forests of Central America, botanists studying epiphytes, aerial plants that rooted themselves in the branches of towering trees, observed behaviors that resembled territorial negotiation. When multiple individuals attempted to occupy the same patch of moss-covered bark, their roots engaged in a slow-motion contest, secreting compounds that subtly shifted pH levels or altered the microbial community to the advantage of one competitor. These interactions unfolded over seasons, yet the cumulative effect resembled a strategic battle for space, waged not through movement, but through chemistry. In the dense understory of Southeast Asian rainforests, researchers uncovered yet another layer of botanical complexity. Plants capable of manipulating animal behavior with a precision bordering on psychological strategy. Certain fig species released chemical blends so uniquely tailored that only a single species of wasp recognized the scent as an invitation to pollinate. These chemical signals were not static. The figs adjusted them depending on the maturity of their flowers, ensuring that pollinators arrived at the exact moment the internal structures were ready. This timing required not simply reflex, but a finely tuned internal mechanism capable of integrating environmental cues such as humidity, temperature, and even the behavioral cycles of the wasps themselves. As scientists documented these interactions, the simplicity traditionally attributed to plant reproduction dissolved, revealing instead a world of intricate negotiations shaped over millions of years. Simultaneously, in the sun-drenched savannas of Africa, acacia trees demonstrated intelligence of a different kind. When grazed upon by browsing antelopes, the trees released tannins that not only made their leaves bitter, but at high concentrations could be toxic. More remarkably, the trees emitted ethylene gas, a volatile chemical that drifted across the air to neighboring acacias. Upon detecting the signal, these nearby trees increased their tannin production preemptively, effectively creating a defensive network across the savanna. Observers noted that antelopes, as if aware of this phenomenon, grazed upwind to avoid triggering this invisible alarm system. The entire savanna became a theater of chemical strategy and counter-strategy, a dynamic conversation between plant and herbivore that unfolded through molecules rather than sound. In Mediterranean landscapes, another form of communication emerged. Wild sagebrush, when mechanically damaged, released airborne cues that neighboring plants interpreted with remarkable specificity. If the damage resembled insect herbivory, nearby individuals ramped up their production of defensive enzymes. If it resembled mere wind stress, the response was muted. This ability to discriminate between types of injury suggested that plants not only sensed their environment, but interpreted it in context, an ability once presumed exclusive to animals.
Meanwhile, in temperate forests across Europe and North America, research on tree canopies revealed astonishing degrees of architectural awareness. When branches from neighboring trees approached each other, many species engaged in crown shyness, maintaining narrow gaps between their leaves as though respecting invisible boundaries. High-resolution time-lapse footage showed that when branches touched, growth rates slowed at the point of contact, preventing entanglement. The mechanism behind this behavior remained mysterious. Some suggested tactile sensitivity at the cellular level. Others argued that differential light detection guided the responses. Whatever the explanation, the effect was unmistakable. Trees maintained personal space, avoiding collision in ways that evoked the spatial awareness of animals navigating crowded environments. These revelations, layered upon decades of burgeoning evidence, nurtured an emerging view of plants as organisms deeply attuned to their surroundings, capable of sophisticated forms of behavior. Yet, as botanists explored external responses, another frontier opened inside the plant body itself. Advances in molecular imaging revealed intracellular networks of astonishing dynamism. Chloroplasts, long portrayed as static green factories,
moved within cells like purposeful travelers, positioning themselves to optimize photosynthesis under fluctuating light. When light became too intense, threatening to damage the photosynthetic machinery, the chloroplasts retreated to safer regions of the cell. This rapid relocation, occurring within minutes, required a system of internal signaling and cytoskeletal rearrangement reminiscent of animal cell responses to stress. But even more surprising was the discovery that plants produced neurotransmitter-like compounds, once believed exclusive to animals: serotonin, dopamine, glutamate. Although plants used these molecules differently, often for growth regulation or defense, their presence raised provocative questions about the evolutionary roots of chemical communication. Scientists uncovered glutamate receptors similar to those in animal nervous systems embedded in plant cell membranes. When roots encountered abrasive soil or sudden injury, waves of calcium ions propagated through these receptors, spreading information rapidly through tissues. Though not neural in the strict sense, these processes bore functional resemblance to neuronal communication, prompting some researchers to argue that plant signaling was a form of intelligence.
As these scientific narratives unfolded, a parallel exploration took shape in the realm of robotics and artificial intelligence. Engineers studying plant behavior began to model algorithms on the distributed decision-making observed in roots and vines. The decentralized intelligence of root networks, which solved complex navigation problems without a central processor, inspired new approaches to swarm robotics and adaptive computation. Vines, with their ability to explore space using only local information, became templates for self-adjusting robotic arms designed to navigate uncertain terrains. In these technological adaptations, humanity found itself learning from organisms long dismissed as simple, revealing that the silent strategies of the plant world held lessons for the future of engineering. But the most profound shift occurred in ecological philosophy, where the discoveries of plant communication and behavior reshaped the foundational assumptions about life. Scholars began revisiting ancient texts with new curiosity. The Stoics' belief in a world soul, the Taoist concept of nature's inherent order, the indigenous view of forests as living communities, all seemed less metaphorical in light of modern research. Even the medieval doctrine of the vegetative soul, once relegated to theological antiquity, gained renewed relevance, not as literal truth, but as early recognition of the complexity within plant life. The idea that intelligence required locomotion, nerves, or brains began to erode. Intelligence, some argued, was the capacity to solve problems in the context of one's environment. Plants operating without the luxury of movement evolved alternative strategies, chemical, electrical, structural, to navigate the challenges of life. Their slowness, once mistaken for simplicity, revealed itself to be a different form of temporal mastery.
Meanwhile, in urban environments, researchers studying street trees, plants growing between concrete and asphalt, found unexpected forms of resilience. These trees, exposed to heat islands, pollutants, and erratic hydration, developed novel adaptations, altered leaf morphology, deeper root penetration despite compacted soils, and changes in stomatal behavior that allowed them to withstand conditions far outside their ancestral climate range. In some cases, urban trees communicated stress signals across surprisingly large distances, possibly through interconnected fungal networks threading beneath sidewalks and parks. Even in the fragmented landscapes of cities, the silent networks of the plant world persisted, forging new pathways where none seemed possible. At the microscopic level, plants demonstrated additional forms of complexity. Root hairs, the tiny filaments responsible for nutrient uptake, exhibited behavior that resembled tactile exploration. When encountering particles of soil, they changed direction or altered their growth rate depending on the texture and composition of the substrate. These responses occurred through mechanosensitive ion channels, molecular structures that allowed cells to perceive and respond to physical pressure. This mechanoperception, fundamental to plant survival, guided root systems through labyrinthine underground environments with an efficiency rivaling that of burrowing animals. In the wetlands of Southeast Asia, researchers observed a phenomenon that underscored the profound adaptability of plant life. Mangrove trees, thriving in waterlogged, oxygen-poor soils, evolved specialized structures called pneumatophores, vertical roots that protruded above the waterline like thousands of tiny chimneys. These structures facilitated gas exchange, allowing the plant to breathe in conditions where most terrestrial organisms would suffocate. During tidal cycles, when water levels fluctuated, the pneumatophores adjusted their internal pressures, maintaining a steady flow of gases. This dynamic regulation hinted at internal monitoring systems sensitive to minute environmental changes, ensuring survival in one of the planet's most challenging habitats. In the Caribbean, seagrass meadows revealed their own quiet ingenuity. These underwater plants formed vast fields that stabilized sediments, filtered water, and provided shelter for countless marine organisms. Yet beneath the surface, their rhizomes, horizontal stems buried in the seafloor, extended for kilometers, forming some of the largest clonal organisms on Earth. These interconnected networks allowed nutrients to flow from resource-rich areas to resource-poor zones, enabling the meadow to function as a single superorganism. When storm surge or human activity damaged a section of the meadow, distant parts compensated,
channeling energy and resources to facilitate recovery. This cooperative behavior, executed without central command, mirrored principles observed in neural networks and social insect colonies. Across the oceans, in the archipelagos of the Pacific, an even stranger chapter in the saga of plant behavior unfolded. On remote volcanic islands, where soil was little more than powdered basalt, the first colonizers were not animals, but plants, pioneers that transformed sterile rock into living landscapes. Scientists studying these early successional species found that their roots exuded complex cocktails of acids, enzymes, and organic compounds tailored to dissolve mineral particles, unlocking nutrients trapped within. These secretions varied not only between species, but between individuals depending on their immediate surroundings, as if each plant assessed the mineral composition of its tiny patch of earth and adjusted its chemical strategy accordingly. Over time, these pioneer species built the very soil upon which future forests would stand, acting as architects of ecosystems long before the arrival of more complex life. Further inland, in the deep valleys of New Zealand, the ancient kauri trees harbored secrets of their own. Kauri forests were known to communicate chemically, but what mystified researchers was their ability to maintain nutrient-sharing relationships across surprisingly large distances. Underground, dense networks of fungal threads connected tree to tree, carrying carbon, nitrogen, and phosphorus not evenly, but selectively, as though the forest redistributed resources to individuals in need. Trees poisoned by invasive pathogens received greater inflows of nutrients from distant relatives, as if the forest itself recognized and responded to suffering. To some observers, this seemed a form of altruism. To others, a physiological strategy shaped by millennia of coevolution. Yet the effect remained extraordinary. An entire forest behaving not as a collection of individuals, but as a single living system. Meanwhile, in the Andean highlands, a peculiar phenomenon captured the attention of climatologists and botanists alike. Cushion plants, dense mound-like organisms resembling green stones, seemed almost eerily efficient at manipulating their microclimates. Their domed shapes trapped heat during frigid nights, warming the air immediately above them by several degrees, a difference large enough to shelter insect communities that otherwise could not survive the altitude. Their internal architecture, a maze of tightly packed stems and leaves, minimized moisture loss, enabling them to endure the harsh cycle of freezing nights and blazing days. These structures were so effective that other species gravitated toward them, establishing miniature ecological communities atop the cushions. The plants became living refuges, oases of stability sculpted through centuries of slow, deliberate growth.
The more scientists studied such organisms, the clearer it became that plant evolution had crafted strategies spanning not just local terrain, but entire epochs. Nowhere was this more evident than in the ancient bristlecone pines of the American West, some of which had lived for nearly 5,000 years. Their twisted trunks, contorted by storms and droughts older than recorded history, bore witness to a timeline beyond human comprehension. What fascinated researchers was not merely age, but adaptiveness. These trees grew in soils so poor that few competitors survived, allowing them to conserve resources and avoid nutrient-demanding growth spurts. Their cellular processes slowed to a pace that seemed geological, repairing DNA damage with uncanny precision and producing resin compounds that thwarted fungi and insects. These ancient pines, silently observing civilizations rise and fall, exemplified a truth long underestimated by humanity. Plants are masters of time, shaping and shaped by eons, operating on a temporal scale inaccessible to human senses. Time itself seemed to take on a new meaning when researchers turned their attention to tropical lianas, massive climbing vines that competed fiercely for sunlight. Some species tracked potential supports with extraordinary accuracy, adjusting their growth patterns based on subtle air currents, temperature gradients, and possibly even infrared signatures. High-speed cameras revealed behavior nearly invisible to the naked eye. When a vine's tip detected a promising structure, the tendrils spiraled faster, as though excited by proximity. When the structure was removed, the tendrils slowed, then reoriented, searching again. The movements suggested a kind of exploratory algorithm encoded within plant physiology, a set of behavioral rules that allowed vines to navigate complex, three-dimensional environments without sight, sound, or locomotion. In subtropical wetlands of Florida, an equally curious drama unfolded. The sensitive plant Mimosa pudica, famous for its rapid leaf folding response, demonstrated behavior that seemed to brush the edges of cognition. When subjected to repeated harmless drops of water, the leaves eventually ceased folding, a textbook example of habituation. But when exposed to a new stimulus, the leaves folded again, revealing that the plant had not simply fatigued, it had learned that one stimulus was harmless while remaining responsive to others. This plasticity impressed researchers because it showed that the plant could modify its behavior based on past experience, storing information in cellular networks without neurons. The mechanisms remained speculative. Some spoke of reversible changes in ion flux, others of epigenetic modulation, but the phenomenon itself was undeniable. In the Mediterranean basin, another kind of plant awareness emerged. one rooted in cooperation rather than competition. Olive groves, some cultivated for thousands of years, displayed genetic mosaics that blurred the distinction between individual and collective. Many ancient olive trees were not single organisms, but clusters of genetically identical trunks sprouting from a shared root system, clonal organisms that persisted across centuries. Their endurance came not from isolation, but from interconnectedness. When one trunk succumbed to drought, disease, or lightning, another grew in its place. The grove functioned as a memory-bearing entity, passing physiological adaptations from one generation of trunks to the next through shared tissues. Human cultures, sensing this continuity, revered such groves as living archives, their twisting forms holding stories older than nations.
In the volcanic soils of Iceland, mosses told a different story of persistence. After eruptions leveled entire landscapes, mosses were among the first to reclaim the cooling lava, carpeting it with vibrant green. Their ability to colonize harsh environments hinged on microscopic structures that captured moisture from fog and geothermal steam, funneling it into internal reservoirs. As they grew, mosses created microhabitats that supported insects, bacteria, and eventually the first grasses and shrubs. In this way, mosses served as the vanguard of ecological succession, rewriting barren terrain into life-supporting ecosystems. Their resilience lay not in speed, but in patience, a capacity to endure years of near dormancy, waiting for conditions to shift before resuming growth. Across the world, similar themes emerged: networks, adaptability, subtle signals, slow strategies refined by the long sweep of evolution. But perhaps the most surprising chapter unfolded not in remote wildernesses, but in the controlled confines of scientific labs. Studies in epigenetics revealed that plants passed memories of environmental stress, drought, shade, temperature extremes to their offspring. Seeds produced by stressed plants germinated with different growth patterns, more resilient root systems, or enhanced resistance to pathogens, even when raised in controlled environments free of those stressors. This inheritance challenged long-held assumptions about genetic determinism, suggesting that plants encoded not only the blueprint for their structure, but also records of their ancestors' experiences. The idea that a seed carried the ghost of its parents' hardships resonated deeply with researchers, hinting at a subtle continuity across generations. Another breakthrough came with studies of plant decision-making. In controlled experiments, split root systems allowed plants to access two separate soil compartments, one nutrient-poor, the other nutrient-rich. Plants directed more roots toward the richer soil, but only to a point. When the rich soil was crowded with roots from neighboring plants,
Individuals sometimes invested more in the poorer soil instead, avoiding competition. This strategy resembled economic decision-making. Plants weighed costs and benefits based on social context. They were not blindly seeking nutrients, but optimizing resource allocation in a dynamic environment. Some species went further still. In dense forests, saplings suppressed in deep shade slowed their growth dramatically, entering a state of suspended development that could last for years. If an opening appeared in the canopy, through windfall, fire, or decay, they surged upward with explosive growth, as though waiting for their moment. The ability to delay or accelerate growth based on external signals represented a mastery of time and opportunity that few animals could match. In this patient dance of light and shadow, young trees displayed a latent potential coiled within their tissues, ready to unfurl when the forest whispered its permission. Yet for all this emerging understanding, humanity continued to overlook one of the most pervasive and astonishing forms of plant behavior: the transformation of landscapes on planetary scales. Plants, through eons of photosynthesis, reshape Earth's atmosphere, driving oxygen accumulation and enabling complex life. Forests altered rainfall patterns through transpiration, drawing moisture inland and stabilizing climates. Grasslands expanded across continents, shaping the evolution of grazing animals and the migration routes of early humans. Even at global scales, the actions of plants bore the hallmarks of coordination, not deliberate in the human sense, but emergent, collective, and profoundly impactful. As scholars grappled with these revelations, the boundaries between scientific disciplines began to blur. Botanists collaborated with physicists to study quantum efficiency in photosynthesis. Ecologists worked alongside computer scientists to model plant networks as decentralized systems. Philosophers revisited ancient debates about the nature of life, considering whether intelligence might take forms radically different from the neural architecture humans possessed. The silence of plants, once interpreted as emptiness, now appeared as a different language, one spoken through chemistry, structure, vibration, and time. And amid these sweeping shifts, a quieter realization took root. The human story had always been entwined with the story of plants. The earliest civilizations rose along river valleys where reeds, grains, and fruiting trees provided food, shelter, and material for writing. Rituals across cultures honored sacred groves, healing herbs, and divine trees that bridged earth and sky. Even in modern cities, hemmed in by concrete and glass, humans gravitated toward parks and gardens, seeking solace in the presence of leaves that seemed to listen even when they could not speak. As the 21st century advanced, and the urgency of environmental crises sharpened, this relationship assumed new significance. Deforestation, climate change, and soil degradation threatened not only ecosystems, but the intricate, ancient intelligence woven through plant life. The destruction of old-growth forests meant the loss of networks that had taken centuries to form. The extinction of species silenced chemical languages never decoded. The fragility of these systems illuminated a truth long obscured by human ambition. Plants were not background scenery in the drama of life. They were its architects, its memory keepers, its oldest storytellers. Modern science, equipped with tools capable of glimpsing the hidden lives of plants, began to listen more carefully. Researchers mapped the electrical pulses of leaves, traced the subterranean whispers of roots, and recorded the faint acoustic signatures of stressed stems. They decoded messages carried through air and soil, uncovering networks of cooperation and competition more subtle than any human-made system. The more they looked, the more the old assumptions dissolved. Plants did not need voices to speak, eyes to perceive, or brains to think. Their intelligence was woven into their tissues, diffused throughout their forms, and rooted in millions of years of evolutionary refinement. In the quiet of greenhouses, in the stillness of forests, in the wind-shimmering fields stretching across continents, plants continued their slow, deliberate work, sensing, responding, communicating, remembering. Their life unfolded not in the quick beats of animal hearts, but in the long, patient rhythm of seasons and centuries. And as humanity stepped into a future where the survival of ecosystems depended on understanding the hidden capacities of the living world, the ancient truth that had shadowed human history resurfaced with undeniable clarity. The Green Kingdom, long underestimated, was not only alive, but aware in ways humans were only beginning to fathom. For in every root that navigates the dark, in every leaf that tilts toward shifting light, in every seed that waits years for its moment to awaken, there resides a quiet, enduring testament to life. Plants, in their silence, have shaped the world more profoundly than any other kingdom. Their secret life, once dismissed as myth, later ignored as trivial, now revealed as astonishingly intricate, continues to unfold all around us, whispering through forests, deserts, oceans, and cities, inviting those who pause long enough to listen to witness a world that has always been alive with signals, stories, and ancient wisdom waiting just beneath the surface of green.